Just by way of introduction, Margaret Reynolds will speak soon, but just I wanted to point out the context that we have to expect more frequent and more severe heat waves. So Cambridge has the UK record for the hottest temperature ever, 38.7 degrees in 2019, and we have to expect we're going to have 40 degrees before long. All the forecasts tell us this, so we got to get ready for this. The heat wave definition for this part of the country is that you must have at least 3 successive days that are each have more than 28 degrees centigrade. And it's when you have a succession of days that heat builds up in your house and it becomes more of a problem. And so the heat wave is quite a good definition for that. And of course, it's not just temperature, it's worse. It's very unpleasant if you have 30 degrees and high humidity. Humidity makes it much worse because your sweat then is less effective at cooling you. And that's what they're suffering in India quite a lot at the moment. And so the chances of heat waves have about doubled in the last few decades, and the prediction is that they will at least double again by 2050. And that's just the number of heat waves, and the severity of some of them will go up again. In 2020, there were over 2,500 deaths in England. I shouldn't be cheery about that, should I? But it's serious. And so I don't want to make light of this. And we will be featuring some advice from NHS on how to keep safe. And also, when we have bad heat waves, we need to expect what they call cascading problems. This is, there will be problems with health and social care. Older people especially will be vulnerable, and children. There will be problems with transport because most of our roads are made with tarmac that melts above 50 degrees. 50 degrees may sound really hot. It's a lot more than the air temperatures I've spoken about. But of course, dark roads will get a lot hotter than the air temperature if they've got full sun on them. And electricity and business and wildlife and so on will also be affected. Okay, so I'm going to stop screen sharing. Margaret, can I pass over to you?
Okay, right. So I'm Margaret Reynolds, and I call myself a green architect. So after many years of practice, I did a master's in environmental design and building physics. And the last 20 years, I've been promoting green design with AC Architects from 2006, and then in my own practice, and I'm now a retrofit coordinator. So we're covering a whole range of topics. Thomas just talked about the more frequent and severe heat waves. And I need to just review a couple of basics because these will help when we're looking at different house situations. Right. So some basics about shading. Materials absorb heat, and they do it in different ways, and that we call that thermal mass of the material. So I'm going to look at that, and I'm also going to look at the seasonal and daily sun on your house, because that is part of what you'll need to consider if you're going to try and keep it up. So dense materials, those are concrete, brick, stone, absorb more heat and solar radiation, and then they release it slowly. And that we say that they have greater thermal mass. They hold energy. Metals, for example, absorb and release heat very quickly. So those we call conductors. So something like insulation foam or timber generally absorbs much less heat, and we say that they have less thermal mass. Now, another thing about materials is that glass, even if it's double and triple glazing, it transmits heat. And the other thing is that surfaces can reflect heat. So if you paint your roof white, you will get less heat coming through it than dark. Foil reflects heat. So if it's on insulation, it reflects the heat. And solar film on glass can reflect the heat out or it can reflect the heat in. So assume your house or a room in your house is cool the morning of a heat wave. How does that heat wave heat actually get in to warm up your house? So windows are a likely route in, but how? So if the window is closed, as we said, the sun still shines through the window, as in the diagram on the left. If this direct sunlight gets through the glazing, it will shine on and be absorbed by any surface it reaches. So as you can see on the photo on the left, you see the sun patches there on the floor, on the cushions. Patches of sunlight. This surface will absorb the heat and then radiate it back into the interior of your house. And it will do that long after the sun has moved around and the window is in the shade. So on the right is that same space with the Venetian blinds blocking the sun path. So it's not making it dark, it's just blocking the sun. And all the sun patches have disappeared. So for me, rule number one in a heat wave is we want to block what we call direct sun. That is the sun beams getting in and heating surfaces inside the room. So if early sun is absorbed by surfaces in the morning, this could cause them to radiate heat back inside the house all of the rest of the day. So it's especially important to shade morning sun, and that means even at 4:30 in the morning. So that means you'll probably need to draw the shades in anticipation of this the night before. However, let's consider what I consider my personal criteria for summer cooling. It's not just that we want to block this sun. We don't want to live in a cave. In my opinion, we also want two further things. We want to still have some daylight in the room, as you see on the picture on the right, but we also would like to see the view outside. So if it's cool outside this morning of where we're expecting a heat wave, but it's going to get hot, suppose the window is open to cool the house down. Is this the best thing to do? So, Tom's going to talk about that later. But let's review a bit more before we look at more examples. To stay cool, you need to know which parts of your home receive sunlight when. And by that, I mean which part of the day, and I also mean which season. So in this diagram at the bottom there's a building in the center. Tall one, doesn't matter. The solar, to the north of the building, it's almost always in the shade. On the east is the morning sun, and on the west, afternoon sun. And the south tends to be much more sunny than the other directions. So in the winter, the sun path is low. So it starts in the southeast and moves to the southwest. That's the orange curve here. And in the summer, it's high. It moves from the northeast to the northwest at a high angle, and that's the red curve. So this is going to be important if you want to keep out direct sunlight. You need to know which windows you need to shade in the morning, the afternoon, and before bed. In effect, cooling that's low tech like this requires developing a heat wave routine. So the other thing that's useful to know is the outdoor temperature, or at least whether it's cooler outdoors than in. This is important for natural ventilation, as you'll see. We do not want to be accidentally sucking that hot air that's outside into your house during a heat wave. So the simplest way to shade is something like roller shades or curtain fabric over the window. But then these don't satisfy my criteria. I want to be able to get light in and I want to see the view outside, but still keep the heat out. So an alternative is blinds. Venetian vertical blinds with slats let some light in and they can allow some view out. Horizontal blinds, that is Venetian blinds, can be angled to deflect the sun, but bring plenty of daylight into the room and also permit a reasonable view out. So here we have blinds that are closed, and then here are some that are deflecting the sun, but we can still see that there's shrubbery and things outside. And again, here's another example of a roof light that could have horizontal Venetian blinds. However, with blinds, there are a fair number of moving parts. These have to be maintained, they have to be cleaned. And the blades themselves heat up in the sunshine. And because they're inside, they transmit that heat into the room. So let's keep looking at, so here's some with horizontal blinds. So the blinds are closed. And this is showing you that in the summertime, when the sun is high, the sun and carrying heat with it could get in when you think the blinds are closed. And that's what I'm saying about being at 4:30 in the morning. You really need to set those blinds to block the sun early in the morning. And in this case, if they're closed, you've got no view out. And if the sun gets on the blinds, they will heat up and warm the room as well. So here we are with blinds horizontal. You can see that's an eye. You can see out. And some of the sun is coming and hitting the blinds and being reflected onto the ceiling. So it's helping with the situation. If you set the blinds to block the sun, then you're only reflecting a tiny bit there. Your view is less good, but if you're standing up, you can tend to see out anyway. Okay. So we'll see there are many reasons for having internal blinds, but there are also limitations. So let's keep looking at other types of external shading. There's a great advantage here in that the sun is blocked before it can heat up the windows or anything inside, unlike internal blinds. So here on the top row, we have wooden slats on a new house, which is a house by AC Architects, which I worked on when I was working with them, intercepting the sun at high summer angles, keeping the window glass cool, but maintaining a view out. These slats are also sometimes known as brise soleil, which is in French means breaking up the sunlight. And you see they can be quite attractive, and the effect on the house can be very nice. On the bottom row, there's shutters. There are 2 points to make about shutters. One, they can provide complete blockage of the sun, and they can provide ventilation through the louvers in a secure and sometimes elegant manner. Some shutters even have adjustable louvers, so you could use them as we were speaking about the Venetian blinds. Shutters are very common in many countries, but they do require the windows to open inwards. In the UK, inward opening windows are very rare. For whatever reason, shutters are expensive in this country. They're very common on the continent, but we don't often find them. And note in this small image in the middle that the shutters on the renovated office building of AC Architects where inward opening windows were installed. And you'll find triple glazed windows from the continent, Lithuania or Germany. They tend to open in. Direct sun can be screened by suspending fabric outside the opening. So heat blocking mesh has been readily available for roof windows for some years. Velux or Facro offer awning blinds that only transmit between 4 to 14% of the heat, claiming to offer 8 times more protection than internal blinds. So on the left, a Facro roof light has no awning down, and that's the view out, chimney across the road. The next photo is the awning being put in place. You hook it onto the open window and then close it. And the next one is the awning in place with a perfectly, to my mind, acceptable view out, particularly if you're blocking, 80, 90% of the heat. So these awnings stop the heat reaching the window frame and the glass, but they still provide light and a view. And often it is at roof level that we get the most heat coming in. Maintenance under the wear and tear of wind loading, rain, grime, all those present significantly greater problems with external blinds as compared to internal ones. These particular fabric awnings roll up into a metal cassette at the top of the roof window. You extend them into place at the beginning of hot weather, and you leave them there until autumn. That way, they do stay cleaner because they're protected and closed and rolled up for a good part of the year. And they're less subject to the wear and tear of winter. External awnings for windows made of see-through heat blocking material like this mesh are not easily obtained in this country, although we are continuing to pursue this. Here are some alternative solutions. So on the left here, 2 pictures of fabric shades that Harry Paticus, who's an architect in London, has put on his house. But of course, you're going to have your room flooded with the color of the blinds in that the shades, and that would be yellow in this case. On the right is another American architect, Bronwyn Barry, with very nice tarp. These things can be rigged up, and we'll see a video about that in a second. And the bottom right is one of our own Eco Homes hosts who has got bamboo roller screens. The bottom right is a photo showing that lighter weight bamboo screens can permit a view out. So that's a natural way to do this, but of course it would be probably less hard wearing than some of these more heavily manufactured products. Okay, so here's an example of some passive houses in Wimbish, which is right near us in Saffron Walden. They're porches on 14 passive house units that have fixed sunshade louvers above the ground floor windows and doors. And then the upper windows are shaded by the roof overhang. So these are quite clever because the blades let in the low angle winter sun, just nips between those 2 shaped louvers. But in the summer, the sun hits, it can't actually get through them. And this shows on, as the sun gets higher and higher, this shows on the 21st of June at the summer solstice, that they effectively shade the entire side, the entire wall, right down to the bottom of the glazed door. So that's quite a clever way to do it. But of course, by August, the shading isn't as good, and August can still be very hot. Okay, so we're going to move on and just, I'm just going to summarize and say that when you talk about shading, you need to know when and where is the sun and make yourself a routine for blocking it into getting into your house. And there are all kinds of advantages and disadvantages to internal shading and external shading. So now Derek is going to speak about his own solution for awnings and blinds, which is very interesting that he's developed in the last few years. Let me make sure I'm getting the right slides here. Okay, so over to you, Derek.
Basically, our house orientates southeast, southwest. So we get the sun full on in the morning, full on in the afternoon at the front, and then the side of the house has got no windows in it, it just absorbs heat. So the house is well insulated. So what we've decided to do was to basically throw some pound notes at the solution, and we invested in an electrically operated blind over the 2/3 of the back of the house, over the kitchen, and that basically comes out when it's sunny, goes in when it's not, and if it's windy it won't come out at all, or if it blows blows while it's out, it will retract. And the blind's 5 meters wide by 3 meters deep, so it gives a huge amount of area. The 2 windows you can see there also have quite sophisticated blinds on, which are operated via a remote control, and we'll see a demonstration of a fully electrically operated one we've got on one of the other windows. As Margaret said, we didn't want to live in a cave, so we've gone for a solution where we can see out of all of our windows during the day, but have the effect of the sun not penetrating the house. Because the blinds have thermal properties, we typically drop them in the winter at night, so we're retaining heat within the house at the same time. So we're using them in reverse at night. I think, Tom, if you press a button, it'll sort of do something.
Ready? Okay, you want to move on?
Yeah.
Just press a button and yes, here it goes.
So this takes about 30 seconds to come out. I was a bit concerned about it in the wind, what happened, and when the installers came, I said I'm a bit concerned about it, and he stood on the chair and shook it, and it didn't do anything. And you can see the amount of area. To the top left-hand corner is a little wind solar operated controller, which will send the blind out and will send it in if it's windy. The next demo is of a picture of what it looks like from the house looking out across the garden. We live in a 70s box. It's not architectural, so we can see out. You can see the amount of, that's a pretty sunny day. That was taken about a week ago. These blinds will come out at 6 o'clock in the morning. I don't do anything. I don't have to worry. It just does it. The key to it is getting the things out early rather than letting the sun come in. The next video is, we have another large window. It's about 10 foot across. It was a patio door, but we've changed it. Fully insulated. In the top left-hand corner, you'll see a round controller, and that is thermal as well as sunlight. And what will happen is these blinds are typically fitted outside, so we have it in what they call a zip cassette. But because our windows open outwards, we couldn't do that. But we wanted a contained unit, and this thing will just drop. And I heard it go on about 6 o'clock this morning. And if you press the button, we can watch it go down. Okay. Is it working? Maybe not.
Let me just check if I've got the right one here.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Click on there.
There we go.
It comes.
And what you'll see is these give incredible, I can't remember what the coefficients are, but they're incredible. But you can see out through the blinds. We didn't want to live in a cave during the summer. So these blinds are out, but you still know it's a sunny day and you can still see the flowers. You can still see the postman walk past. They're not cheap, but we went for a quality product. So
I'll play that again.
You pay for what you get, really.
There we go.
As you can see quite clearly through it, and it has incredible coefficients. If you look at the Mermat M screen fabric, you'll see what it does.
Okay.
So
Thanks, Derek.
Okay.
That was
Okay.
great. And so we're having a little time for questions and answers here.
Yeah, actually, there's a question from Sarah. If you'd like to, you're welcome to unmute and ask the question yourself if you'd like to, Sarah, or I can ask it for you.
Yeah, no, I don't mind speaking. So it's just Venetian blinds are obviously a very easy fit, and I was just wondering whether to what extent material mattered. So wood ones look very attractive, but are plastic ones more efficient at doing the job? Which does it at all? My question.
Okay, so would you like me to answer that? We have metal ones because they're so slim, and we like to be able to pull the whole set of blinds up and out of the way. And with wooden ones, they're very thick, so you lose a lot more of the window that way. They probably don't absorb as much heat, so that's a good thing. They're a very attractive color, but we felt we basically wanted them to be as thin as possible and to be able to be very flexible in shady. I don't think, I mean, you just have to try there's different thicknesses, widths of blind too. I think the wooden ones tend to be a bit bigger. Would you say that? I don't know if you've looked at the different range that's available.
Not a huge amount of research, to be honest. So no, not
Yeah.
yet.
I think there's something to be said if you're going to keep them down for having wooden ones, because they're not going to absorb as much heat, and so they won't transmit as much heat.
Great, thank you.
Right. Leslie has a question. Leslie, would you like to ask, or shall I ask for you?
No, you can ask. That's all right.
Okay, sorry. What's the material used on roller blinds that let the light through?
Yes. Now we found some, and I'm afraid I have to look. I'll have to put that in the chat later. It's mesh, which is called, light blocking mesh, and you can buy it, because I had some clients who did order a roll of it from Australia, where they know probably more about heat and heat waves than we do, and they have hung it on the outside of their windows, because ideally you do want to keep the window, want to keep the screening outside if you can. Otherwise, the kind of mesh that comes with Velux and Facro roof lights is not available commercially, and there's no window blinds that are available commercially, and it's a great pity. It seems to me that's something that we really want, is to be able to just in the springtime connect some a bit low way and put her DIY shade up. You should be able to just connect a light mesh screen like that onto the window for the season, but so far that is not available. And I'll find the names of the fabric that my clients found out and put them in the chat for later, for which we'll send.
And we will be circulating the chat in an email tomorrow, so you can catch up on that afterwards if you want.
Okay, thank you.
There's a question from Francis. Our house is 80% corten. Does this absorb heat? And corten is rusty steel, which I wasn't aware of.
Yes, that will be absorb enormous amount of heat if it's exposed to the sun. If it's shaded, it may not, or painted. Raw corten steel is going to expose and conduct a huge amount of heat.
It does.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a question from Emerson's I've got here. I'm not too bothered about seeing out of sunny windows. It's only a few days in the year and the view isn't that great anyway. What materials are best for reflecting the heat?
So, in fact, perhaps I can answer that. I've just put a reply into chat. And so the fabric that we used on our DIY awning is from a company called Point North, with a link there. They call it P6, but anyway, it's a fairly rugged fabric, and it has an aluminized surface on one side. It's not like a mirror, but it's totally heat reflecting, and so I recommend that. We've been, we've got some on an awning that we've been using for over 10 years, and it works just fine still.
But it's not translucent.
That's right. It's completely blocking for heat and for light. Okay, so I think I'm now sharing you a slide about ventilation. I'm just going to talk about how you can ventilate your house, particularly when it's cool at night. But first of all, I'm saying here, when it's hot outside, then fairly obviously shut the windows and doors and vents, particularly if they're going to let in hot air. Maybe you've got a shady side of your house where you could still enjoy cool air, but make sure you're not letting in hot air. And then the next thing is, when it's cooler outside, particularly at night, it's really powerful if you can flush your house with cool air to get the whole fabric of the house cooled down. And so if you're on two or more stories, then if you've got a tall house, then it's great if you can open windows or skylights at the top, and also open vents or windows at the bottom of the house. And then you will get a kind of chimney effect where the warm air rises and out of the top of the house and the cool air is drawn in. Best to open windows at the bottom that are on a cool side of the house. But of course, maybe you're on a single story apartment or bungalow, and so you don't then have the opportunity of having your whole house as a chimney. And so there, ideally, try to get through ventilation. If you can open windows or vents or even doors on both sides, on opposite sides of your house or apartment, then you're trying to get through ventilation to go from one side to the other. Often the people who often suffer worst in heat waves are people in single aspect flats. These are flats where you only have windows on one side. And so that can be quite an issue, as you can imagine. It's a real challenge. If you have the window which can open at the top and the bottom, then that's good. You will get some circulation like this and hot air going out of the top, presumably, or hopefully. But we've thermal imaged some flats where people were having a problem, and they had there was solar thermal on the roof of this block of flats. Hot pipes from that solar thermal, being very effective in the summer, were coming down through the back of their flat, and they were poorly insulated. So I think they've been improved with insulation now, but anyway, that can be a big problem. If you are in single aspect, then the other thing I would suggest is, if you can put a fan near where the cool air is coming in and have that blow the cool air to the back of your space, and the warm air will circulate round and out of the top of this window. Okay, but of course, you may have problems as to whether you are able to open the windows you'd like to do with security. Obviously, if your house gives onto a street, you're not going to open the windows wide like this, But for most kinds of window, you can get security fittings like these that restrict the opening of the window. This secured by design is features specifications for windows and doors that have these kind of security features. Sash windows too have various means of, this is called vent lock, which when this button comes out like that, as you can imagine, that stops the sash window opening more than that, whatever it's set to. And so that gives you a convenient way of opening it a bit, but in a secure way. And another reason might be that outside you have a problem with noise or air pollution. Again, that's going to make this more difficult to try and get good ventilation at night. But it's a winner if you can do this. Cool off your house before the next hot day. So a little about insulation now. Here is a thermal image, and it's showing that this slate roof is at 74 degrees on a hot day. So, you know, this is really hot, you know, nearly hot enough to fry an egg, this slate roof. So you can imagine that in the loft below this, it's also getting baking hot. And you may want to be insulating if you're in that situation. It's particularly effective. There's one kind of insulation called multifoil insulation, where I think, as you can see, you have a reflective surface and then a thin layer and then another reflective surface. So in this, there's a stack of 4 reflective surfaces. And if you had multifoil like this, either under this roof or across on the floor of the loft, maybe on top of insulation there, multifoil is good at reflecting radiant heat. And if you have a hot roof above you, the main way it will be heating your house is by radiating heat downwards, because of course convection doesn't really transfer the heat in a downwards direction. Another thing you may need to be insulating is hot pipes or a hot water tank if you have one. So again, you really don't want these hot pipes adding to the uncomfortable heat of your home in a heat wave. So insulate them, and of course this insulation will also be reducing your energy bills in the winter when otherwise you're using more heat than you really need. So a little more on thermal mass that Margaret mentioned. So brick, stone, concrete, these are the kind of weighty building materials that have a lot of thermal mass, but their effect can be useful because they kind of steady the temperature. And so just thinking about solid wall insulation, this is an example we're looking at first with external insulation, outside this big brick wall. Now, this brick wall will have a lot of thermal mass, and because it's inside insulation, that will have a very useful effect on steadying the temperature in this room, where you've got thermal mass inside. And this is slightly in contrast to if you've got internal insulation inside your wall, then a room like this will heat up and down quite quickly. Sometimes that may be an advantage if you want to be able to, get home from work and quickly heat your house. But it will also tend to be less comfortable in a heat wave, the house with this external insulation will tend to have a steadier temperature, less of the hot peaks during a heat wave. And so just pointing out here that carpets are insulation too, not like the serious wall insulation, but in this situation, if you've got tiles on a solid floor, if you have basically a concrete floor on your ground floor, you may be wise to cover it with tiles rather than the carpets, because that will then make you more connected to the thermal mass of your solid floor. So another thing, it's not exactly, well, I'm just talking about external surfaces here. So here's a thermal image. These are two identical kind of mirror image homes in a terrace, and actually this one is a load hotter than the one on the right. I'll just put the temperatures on. So it's in a heat wave, so the surface of this part is 48 degrees, and this part is 7.5 degrees cooler. And here is the reason. So on the left, we have a house with a exposed brick wall, and so that is absorbing a lot more of the radiant heat from the sun than this white painted one that is really substantially cooler on the surface. The temperature difference of the rooms inside won't be this great, but I think it really will be noticeable. So just going back, here's the thermal image, and here is the paint showing the white paint. And so in general, if you can have light colors or white colors to your walls or your roofs, even if you can get not common in Britain. I don't know what you get planning permission for to have a white painted roof. Maybe you've got a flat roof, something like that. It can make quite a difference. And so finally, I'm in this section going to talk about accidental heating. And so this is a diagram I borrowed where these places with the number 4 are highlighting ways in which you might be heating your house in a heat wave in ways that actually it's good to try and avoid. And so they are, you may have a boiler mounted inside your home. So presumably you haven't got the central heating turning on, but this will be running when you're using hot water. And so if it's free in a room, that may be heating this room here in a way that you'd rather not. And of course, doing cooking, you probably still want to cook, but here is a reason to be eating cool food during a heat wave. Salads, if you're doing a lot of cooking, then that's going to warm up the kitchen in a way that you maybe rather not. Similarly, if you have a hot water tank, the key thing there would be to insulate it well. And as I mentioned before, maybe you've got hot pipes carrying water around when you run the hot tap in the kitchen or whatever. And so insulate those wherever you can. Of course, there's laptops, TVs, etc., that are giving off accidental heat. I think this diagram, the people kind of miss out another important category, that is your appliances. So if you can avoid particularly using your tumble dryer during a heat wave, it's probably a really good opportunity to be drying your clothes outside, or other appliances like the washing machine on a hot wash will be maybe heating your home in a way you'd rather not. And so another way of doing this in the longer term is to choose energy efficient appliances, because obviously things that aren't energy efficient are usually giving off the rest of the electricity they use as heat, which you'd probably like to avoid. So you can get a good feel of this by looking at the energy labels, but the labeling system has changed last year. In the old system, in fact, there were, it started off with levels A, B, C, and D, D being the worst. And actually then that extended a bit, so to A+, and now A++. It was getting a bit much. And so the EU have rearranged how these labels work. And so now with a new appliance now, look out for this kind of label. So these are the same labels, well, sorry, old and new labels for the same fridge. So as a comparison, this particular fridge was an A++, and now in the new scale, that has all been rescaled, and that is now a C. So there is room for appliances B and A, which are better than the old A++. And the calculation method has changed a bit, so that that's not a big deal. But this fridge is now believed to consume 66 kilowatt hours per year, typically. The other thing you get in the new energy label is a QR code in the corner. And if you scan that, you'll get more information about that particular appliance. So a place to go, oh no, I'll just remind you again, I'm sure you know about switching things off when they're not in use. It's easy to say. And then another place to well, I'm hearing somebody with a dog. I don't know if you can mute. So here's a good place. You can click on these links in the PDF of the slides. I recommend a website called Sustit, and they rate all kinds of appliances and electronics, and not just the ones shown here. And it's they're not using they don't belong to any branch of the industry. They're truly independent. Okay, so one other thing that may be important and useful is to think about personal cooling. This isn't so much to do with your home and its energy, and some of these are obvious. Okay, drinks, cool showers, fans, spraying yourself with water will all really help you stay cool, as will wearing loose, light-fitting clothes, and if you go outside, having a hat with a wide brim, that really helps. Here's a little tip that I only tried out for the first time the last time we had a heat wave. So you put a hot water bottle, so-called. No, don't fill it to the brim with water, because of course, when water freezes, it expands, and that would definitely tear your hot water bottle. But if it's nearly full with water, put it in the freezer and then go to bed with it. And it's remarkably good at keeping yourself cool through the night. It's having the ice in your hot water bottle carries on keeping you cool. If it feels too cold, then wrap it up in something else. Maybe you can consider sleeping where it's cooler. Maybe there is a shady room on the different floor, maybe a ground floor, where it will stay cooler at night. Then, of course, around midday or in the early afternoon, when it's hottest outside, it's good to avoid going out or to avoid exerting yourself outside. And so this link will lead you to some NHS advice about heat exhaustion and heat stroke, how to avoid that. And maybe you can also think about looking out for your neighbours. So particularly maybe elderly neighbours or young children as well are more vulnerable to heat stroke and heat exhaustion. And so, or maybe you know somebody who is living in a house or a flat that is really hard to keep cool. Maybe you can invite them round to cool off in your house. So, Margaret, shall I think I'll carry on, and I'm showing the first of your slides about using a garden. Can you talk to this?
Yeah, not muted. Good. Okay, so I just wanted to add a few thoughts I had about gardens. The way we get cooling typically comes from evaporating water. So the water absorbs heat as it dries up. So you can actually use this evaporation to make your garden cool, because leaves, as you can see there, transpire, and that means they release the water that they've taken up through the roots and the stem through in the form of vapor through the leaves. Okay, so next slide, Tom. Tom, can you do the next one? That's it. Okay. Oh, sorry, I'm missing one. I think you've skipped one. Yeah, okay, that's it. Can you go back one? There we go. Okay. Evaporation from transpiration really makes effectively natural air conditioning. No, we've gone, you've overshot again. Can I have the second slide? Can I have the second slide, Tom?
Is the second slide. Why can't you do this?
That's it. Thank you. So if you have leafy plants, they could be low plants like perennials in beds, low shrubs, tall shoulder height shrubs or climbers, and then trees on top. You'll need to find shade loving plants that can be underplanted with plants above them. But a green wall of leafy plants like this also gives you shade, which is going to make it cooler. And of course, privacy as well. If they're evergreen, you get green in the winter. Okay, so next slide. Can I have the next slide?
You've got it. You've got it.
No. Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, I haven't got it on mine. Okay, good. Now, so if you can use your wastewater every day, you can effectively store it in the leaves in your garden. So washing up water is a really easy source, but clearly you've got to stop using your dishwasher. You can scrub vegetables in a bowl and then pour that on garden plants. And I'm showing here that it is possible to siphon off bath water. This is my house and the bathroom is upstairs. So I've got old hoses. I put them in the tub under stones when it's full, having primed them from the tap. And then they suck all the bath water out. and it runs down the roof, and then there's two of them. One goes to the left side of the picture, and the other one carries on. If you look down below there, in between the lawn and the shrubs, right round to the other side, and that my plants flourish with shampoo or detergent or whatever. There's no harm to the plants at all, and that if you do that regularly, particularly when we've had 6-7 weeks with no rain at all, you just do that every day. Morning, I do the part of the garden that's in the shade, and then evening, I do the other part that is dark. So those are, it helps the plants to survive, and they grow quite luxuriantly when there's heat, as long as you're providing water. So next slide. Right, so if you're going to store moisture in your garden, ideally you want to hold it in for the maximum benefit to the plants. So if you're composting, and I'm probably talking to people who know all about this, even in a small garden, you can have what we have there on the left at the bottom. It's a tumbling compost bin on a frame, and it spins around, but it means it never is on the ground and it never gets vermin in it. And then you can tip it out onto a sheet of or tarp or something, and just lift out the compost and shake it off the tarp around your plants. Once you've got a culture going, you can tip, say, 2/3 of it out onto a tarp or sheet and put it around your plants, and that really does hold in the moisture. And of course, there's lots of nutrients for your plants too. And by the way, I find that birds, we have lots of birds in our garden, they love to peck at the compost, so presumably there's still nutrients in it. And they also love to hide in thick leafy garden borders. And if you set up a bird bath that you can almost see there in the on one of the beds, they flock to the garden, and it's another good thing to be doing. So that's my contribution, saying that if you can use your garden to make it the cool side of your house. Thank you.
Great. Right, well, so we'll move on to the next questions. Just before we do that, earlier on, I should have been sharing a PDF of the slides of tonight's presentation. So I'm just put that in chat now, including some Keeping Cool in a Heatwave resource from Tom as well that he shared, he was talking about earlier. So those are easy to download. I think that the presentation, the slides include sort of working links. And I think one of them was, there was a question from Anne about the Mermet M screen. And it was a particular question, could you buy small quantities easily, as it's not clear from the website whether or not they normally sell to individual householders? And I'll just share the web link for that product. Is that something, Derek, is that something you could answer, or? Hello?
Simple answer is no, I don't know. I basically,
okay.
I went with a local specialist company and we looked at a number of products, but I did speak to their technical director on one of the products because I wasn't sure what color to use, and they were very, very helpful. So, yeah.
Great. Okay. I think we've got a few questions from the last Q&A, but if you've got any more to add. Yes. Sorry, I didn't catch that.
I was just going to say about fabric. First of all, Caribbean blinds will do external blinds for you, and they're readily available in this country, but they cost a great deal of money. So there are fabrics. I have written here Soltis, Soltis, and I'll try to put more in, but that's something to look at. And again, the Australian company I still haven't found, but I'll send that through to put in the sending out.
Great, thank you. So just going back to some of the earlier questions, Tricia, you had a couple of questions, and you're welcome to ask them through the microphone if you like. Or I can ask for you, Tricia, if you would like to.
No, that's fine. I don't mind. Not at all.
that's
No. Oh goodness, what was I asking?
well, I can.
The fabric about. I've just scrolled back. So I was first curious about the fabric that Tom's wife used, but I think he's actually answered directly underneath about that, hasn't he?
Right.
And then the second one, because I've got a south-facing garden, so the back of my house gets very, very hot in the summer. So I'm quite curious about these wooden slatted sort of shade outside that was shown on the house at Hawkston. Are those angles place specific? Would I need to get somebody to actually calculate the angles that the slats would have to be built at for my particular location?
If it's Cambridge, the oh yes, no, it's the for Saffron Walden, this winter sun is 19.5 degrees and the summer sun is 66.4. You can get the angles, but to get the louvers, you probably need to get to a specialist to have them made. But you could just put slats of wood at those to catch those angles and overlap enough so that it wouldn't come through.
Yeah, no, I've got a friend who's a very competent builder, so I'm sure he could
Well,
build
yeah.
it for me. But is there a particular source that I could go to that would tell me how to work out the angles then, please?
No, I have another slide, which maybe I should have kept in, which was one I did for a possible pergola in Cambridge, which actually wasn't built, but that gives the Cambridge angles, which I'd have to go back and
That would
find
be
my
great if you've got those. Thank
Yeah.
you.
it's not difficult. You just Google sun angles
Okay, thank
for
you.
Cambridge and it'll give it to you. It's something like 14 and it goes up about, let me just see.
So Margaret, if you're able to share that other slide with me, I will put it in the email follow-up tomorrow.
Yeah, I thought I said it in the text, but I haven't got it. It's on the slide. Yeah, I'll do that.
There's a question about from Emerson's about insects, actually. An issue with opening windows overnight. We get lots of mozzies. Just an observation there.
Yeah. You can get veluxes, certainly in the States. Everything has screens. And I don't know whether that's possible to add in. You might ask Velux, which is all over the world, or FACRO, whether they would allow you to put in, you can add in screens for Veluxes. But again, I have never heard of windows that include that.
It's sort of so common in other countries, isn't it, that you have a separate screen door. But in the link I had in chat earlier for Point North, they are a kind of specialist fabric supplier, particularly for camping gear. And so they have midge nets and mosquito nets that you can buy by the meter. So you could, with a frame, make up your own.
You don't need to.
Sorry?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes?
We missed some.
Well, I have fitted ones that are on a roller, and they're fitted in because we live right next to a lake, and they also PV resistant, so they reduce the solar gain.
Yeah.
And they stop the insects, reduce the solar gain, and roll up in the winter when I don't want them.
Excellent. Are they inside or outside?
Inside.
Yeah, so it's not quite outside, but then outside we've got,
But then then I can have the air from the windows, but no insects.
yes.
And
Yeah.
I get the PV benefit.
So that's really interesting, Francis. And I don't know if you can look
Who
up
makes those?
any link to that and
I
share it.
will.
That would be great.
I'll email it to you via the
Okay.
email you sent. Okay.
Thank you.
Because it would be great if it did both insects and, I mean, I think the mesh would do insects, but it's not.
No, this is brilliant. This is really brilliant. But it's sort of white, so it's sort of, and it's fitted, but it's really good. I really recommend it. I put it on all my windows.
That
Yeah.
sounds good.
But I have also put the because I got so much heat gain because we're core 10 house. I also put the film on the outside of the windows.
Yes. So in the resource that's linked to in the chat,
Yeah.
called "Keeping Cool in a Heat Wave," it's a two-sided PDF, and in there I have links to suppliers of solar control film, and a video showing you how to apply it to a glass window. Obviously, you've got to be there's a bit of a technique in applying it. It's not difficult. Check the video, and then you'll get it on without any little bubbles, and that is very
Common
effective.
in the States. Sorry, very common in the States to have that, and in the South they put the film on to reflect the heat out because heat is more of a problem, and in the North they put it to reflect the heat in because keeping warm in the winter is a problem. I don't know how easy it is to get that when you order windows. I haven't had clients want to do that.
And so the more general way of specifying, I mean, people are quite keen, and again, this is in this extra resource coming that you can click on there called "Keeping Cool in a Heat Wave." You can specify window glass or for a roof light, which is called low G for golf, low G glass, and that has a special quality. It is slightly less transparent than plain window glass. You lose a tiny bit of the visible light through it, which you won't notice, I don't think, but it reflects a lot of the thermal radiation, and so this is a useful quality.
Wait,
Sorry?
does it reflect it in or out? Does it reflect it back into the house for winter or outside for summer?
I think it's reflecting the short wavelengths of infrared that come from the sun, but not the long wavelengths that we have.
But which way is it directed? Does it want to keep it in the house or keep it out of the house?
It is designed solely to keep out sunlight, sun heat.
Because in the cases where I've heard of, in fact, I did it on one house, we regretted not having the winter sun. It was it was reflecting out the winter sun.
So that is the disadvantage of solar film, low G glass, and so in a way you can have it both ways and benefit from winter sun and keep it out in a heat wave by using shading or awnings or more other controllable means of keeping out that hot sun in the summertime, which would sound a bit crazy in the winter. So I think that is at the end, slightly early, of the main part of this talk. And if you want to, though, do stay around and perhaps you can lead us in with some more questions.
Yes, actually, there's a couple of questions related sort of around the same sort of topic. So I will just go back to that. That's around sash windows. The idea of opening your sash windows. One question from Linda is it better to have most open at the top or the bottom, or some ventilation top and bottom of a sash window? And that sort of connects to another question that Anne has, which is, when it's hot in our attic, I tend to pull down the blackout blind to keep the sun out, but I also open the sash window a smidge at top and bottom, so the trapped hot air between blind and window can rise up and out. while being replaced with slightly cooler air from outside. So is there any guidance really on that?
I think that's right. I think the the general guidance on opening windows is don't open windows if they are going to let in air that is hotter than the inside. Obviously, that will just warm you up. But there are times, like as Anne describes, where this can be really useful, and particularly if you've got the sash and you can open it top and bottom, then it will help get a circulation going that will cool that room that you're in. But if, for example, you're doing this nighttime ventilation and you're wanting to flush out the hot air and bring in the cool air, then opening the window wide if possible is good. And in general, if it's a ground floor window, you're probably going to get cooler air coming in the bottom part of your sash.
Yeah, I mean, there's a question. It's probably you've perhaps answered this question already from Jackie. She asked a question: I have a first floor flat and open the loft hatch. Does this help? And I suppose perhaps does it also relate to the temperature at the time? Mostly.
Well, it's going to depend if she's got some kind of outlet at the top of her loft. I mean, just probably letting the heat up into the loft will help a bit, but it needs to exit, and then it will draw cool air in. But it's just a blocked loft hatch. I don't know that it's going to do very much.
Yeah, Jackie, if you're still with us, you could feel free to jump in. Okay.
Sometimes you can put a roof light of some kind in your loft. North facing is better.
There was a question from Katya earlier, but I think she may have left. It's not really a question. Well, it's more of a statement than a question, and perhaps there was a question to it. So I don't think she's still with us. So we'll move on to the next question. Let's see. Sorry if I'm missing anyone. Feel free to jump in, put on your microphone and ask away. Okay, so I think Tricia, would you have one more question? Is there a potential solution for conservatories? In a sunny position, they're helpful for providing winter heat, but are far too hot in summer, even with glass in the ceiling for reflecting sun. Marmot ceiling blinds, perhaps? She has to leave, so she wasn't able to stay for that. But perhaps we could put an answer in the notes.
Where the Kew Gardens or anywhere, they have massive amounts of ventilation in the summer, and they need to have inlets at a low level to bring in as much cool air as possible and get it through and out the high level roof lights. But still, you also have massive amounts. They're incredibly vulnerable in the summer.
Yeah, so I was on the Mermet website yesterday, and they have a lot of offerings of clever blinds for conservatories, but they are high quality, high end offerings. Shop around for what suits you.
Ideally, you would have a reflective roof that you could put over the top in the summer, because you don't want any of the greenhouse or the conservatory to get warm. So to reflect it before it ever gets in it would be the best, but then it's not going to be daylight.
And another thing that greenhouses, and I suspect conservatories too, can have, which is a kind of a mechanical thermal window opening lever. So you get, I think they have memory effect metal in them, and when this window opening device gets up to a certain temperature, because the greenhouse or conservatory are getting too hot, they will automatically open the window, but just mechanically. So it's a nice, reliable means of doing that automatically.
It's quite. There's an observation from Sarah, who is also, I think, has left, but not a question so much as an observation, but it seems that some of the measures that would stop a house overheating in summer, such as painting it white, would stop it benefiting from solar warming on sunny winter days. So is it a question of, what's the most important problem? I guess it depends how much climate change you've got.
Yes. So we have to plan for a time when keeping cool will be more important in our experience, and we do. You might say, some might say, fortunately, expect winters to be warmer. I don't really regard that as a net benefit because of everything else that's going to happen with climate change, but that is the likelihood in the coming decades. But I think as a general observation, that is dead right. And so many of the things we've suggested for easing heat waves are not so good in the summer, in the winter. I mean, in the winter, but of course, the ones which you can have both, if the means that you're controlling the sun is controllable, that you have an awning that you can deploy or not, or etc., things like that.
But we should say that with external insulation, you've got this heavy mass of the house, and you say, I want it warm in the winter, and the insulation keeps it warm when it's cold outside. You say, I'm keeping this cool in the summer, the insulation keeps it cool when it's hot outside. So you win with thermal insulation, and to some extent you lose with internal, because you've divorcing the atmosphere of the inside of the house from that thermal mass, which works in your favor. You can get it to hold the temperature you want and use the insulation to keep it that way.
Interesting.
I sympathise with Tricia, who said in chat that her problem with opening doors is hay fever.
Yeah.
So that's another issue that I shall add to these slides another time, something I suffer from. And she talks about having an air filtration unit, which
mechanical ventilation with heat recovery units have filters, and they pick up they're black with tire particles from roads, particularly in some place like London. And they also, you can see the seeds, the grains on them, and they are much, much better for people with hay fever or allergies or any kind of respiratory problems.
So are we coming to a close now, Ian, or are there other ones? I believe so. I mean, I think there's Francis has kindly put I think that's is that an email address, Francis, for the insect over blinds? Sorry, I'm not sure if Francis is she is still there.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yes, that's an email address, and then the company is called Stream, STREME, and then you can just look them up, and they do all sorts of different ones.
Insect screens.
Yeah, insect screens, but as I say, they fit very neatly on the because the windows open outwards. They fit very neatly, and we don't get the problem with the insects because we live next to a lake, so we're in the fens with a lot of mosquitoes, so it's very effective from that point of view, but also because it's supposed to have some properties of filtering out the UV.
So do your windows then open outwards?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, mine are these ideal combi ones, and they're triple glazed, but unfortunately we made a mistake of we could have put some sort of heat filter in them, but I wasn't advised about that, so that's why I've had to put it on the outside, because if I put it on the inside, of course the windows would explode, because it would make them really hot.
I'm aware that Cambridge Blinds are putting in some mesh blinds in one of my neighbours' houses.
Oh, good. External?
They're internal. She's having a large awning fitted. She's it's quite frail, but she wants the windows open, so he's having blinds made for her, which I gather are very similar to what you would see in the US, the sliding bug blinds you get.
Yeah, you slide and push against the frame. They're quite handy.
Yeah, so Cameron at Cambridge Blinds can talk to you about that if someone's interested.
Oh, look, I can just show you. I can show you here, I think. Can I? How can I show you?
You need to turn on your camera on your iPad, Francis.
Okay, wait a minute. How do I do that? Yeah.
Hopefully you've got a camera icon somewhere around your Zoom window.
Oh, yeah. Start video, no share content.
Yes. Start video, and then we'll.
Start video.
Yep.
No. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, we're seeing you now.
We don't want me. We want. How do I?
So can you point it now at your blind?
Okay. That's. Can you see?
It's hard to make out at the moment.
Wait a minute. I'll get there.
there. Yeah, I can see it.
Yes.
You can see it, and then what I do is I go like that, and it's gone.
Yeah, that's really neat. So I've now
bugs and sun. Good.
Bugs and sun. Yeah.
So I've linked to Stream's website.
Yeah.
They call these things fly screens, but of course they can stop smaller insects as well, I think.
But if in the UK we have internal windows that open inward, we really want those same things outside. That's better protection from the sun, and it would stop the insects too. But they need to be.
And then you couldn't open the windows, could you? Because our windows will open up outwards in England.
No, but they open inwards. Tend to open inwards in England.
Do they? Oh, none of mine do. Not a single one of my windows open inward. Perhaps because they're Danish. I don't know.
Sorry. No, beg your pardon. That's right. Okay, sorry.
So that's why you can't really have it on the outside.
Yeah, sorry. That's my mistake. It's in Europe that they open inwards, of course, because they have the shutters. So sorry, I got that.
Can you just say the name of those screens again, please, Melinda? Was it
Stream.
Melinda or Francis?
Francis. Stream.
Francis, yes.
S for sugar, TREM, mother E. Stream.
So if you can look in chat, then the last entry in chat gives we're showing that website, their link. It looks impressive. So thanks very much.
May I add one quick thing? Is that
Sure,
all right?
go ahead.
Thanks. So coming from Australia, where as a child it was ridiculously hot, what we did there and what I do here and ahead of investing in awning is just make some like sheets or something very wet when it's extremely hot, and then have the windows in this country north up at the top of the house open, so there's some circulation. And whilst we don't have extreme humidity yet, that really solves the temperature problem in the house. Most of our windows, big windows, are all southwest facing, so the house otherwise gets ridiculously hot. But yeah, awning is next on my list.
That sounds a great idea, Melinda. Where would you hang the wet sheets?
Reasonably high up in, well, if the hottest room, well, yeah, I've got various ways of fixing things, reasonably high up.
Yes.
But hanging them vertically, but it just makes a massive difference.
Great.
Like just evaporating.
Yeah, exactly.
And the cool air from them will tend to sink to spaces below. That's a great idea. So I'll remember that next time if our home is unpleasantly hot. But actually,
Loft is a great place to dry your laundry too. For goodness sake, don't use a dryer in the heat.
So those sheets are hung on the inside of the window. Is that correct?
No, I hang them up in the middle of a room.
Oh, okay.
And it
so the opposite. Normally, we are advising people not to dry their washing indoors if they can avoid it at all. But I think in a heat wave, it sounds like that could be really beneficial.
When I lived
Okay.
in Australia, we used to get the Coles sheets out, put them in a bath, end to end, wring them out, and lay them as across us so we could get cool enough to go to sleep.
Wow.
Very good.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
right.
How
So
many was
good to
that?
have Australian support here. So I think we're dwindling now. We're going to close and wish you well in learning more. I've certainly learned some useful things tonight, and we'll email you tomorrow. Anything else final anyone wants to say?
No, thank you very much, though.